Welcome to the Conservation Is podcast, a Conservation Chat UK production. This is the place where we start the conversation about all things conservation and share them with our listeners. You can join in and interact with us using the hashtag ConservationIs and the hashtag ConservationChatUK. Let's start the conversation. Hello everyone and Happy New Year! We hope that you had a lovely festive season and enjoyed Christmas and are ready for a brand new, healthy, sustainable and exciting 2020. We're here today with you for episode 4 of the Conservation Is podcast. Today we're coming at you with part 2 of the Everyday Environmentalist. So today we've decided that we're going to be talking about food. So I'm going to let Stu lead with this one because he's like fact man. So Stu, why don't you lead the way?
Okay, I don't know if fat man's the right title, but I just think one of the biggest things we can do to lower our environmental footprint is just look at stuff we buy around the house and in the home, and this is what this series really focuses on. But something obviously we eat 3-4 times a day, so by changing our diet is something we can do quite easily to reduce our impact on the environment. And the United Nations themselves say that one of the biggest things we should do to reduce our carbon footprint is actually eat less meat within our diets. So Laura, I know you're plant-based. Do you want to tell us about your journey a little bit?
Yeah, so I've actually been plant-based for 4 years now, actually a little more than 4 years. And I was actually vegetarian before that. But basically, since going plant-based, I just need to kind of stress here that I do kind of see myself as a healthy, whole foods, plant-based kind of person. I definitely enjoy a Greggs vegan sausage roll from time to time. But ultimately, I'm looking at being as healthy as I can be, eating as cheaply as I can, and obviously, for me, it started off as a welfare issue. I'm an animal lover, I studied animal management, and I felt like a bit of a hypocrite looking after animals and eating them. It didn't sit right with me. So that's actually initially why I went vegan. But as time went on and I started to study animal science and animal conservation, environmentalism, and I really kind of clued up and watched lots of documentaries and read lots of books, I realised actually that meat and dairy and egg products are such a strain on the environment, and I genuinely couldn't sleep at night if I was contributing to the loss of for example, the Bornean jungle. Like, that to me is on its own is worth going vegan for, to prevent deforestation and just losses of massive areas of biodiversity. Also, from like a health and feeling point of view, I've never felt better than I have on a plant-based diet. And it's never been easier to cook, and I never have to prep too much. Once you kind of know what you're doing, it is really easy. But obviously, Stu, you're also plant-based. What about you?
So my journey is a little bit different, because for over 10 years I went to like more, if you can use the word, some people will say you can, some people disagree with it, but I ate more ethical meat. So there's lots of campaigns about intensive eggs, intensive chickens and so on when I was at university. And from that point of view, I started looking at the different farming systems, because I think you can have different opinions on farming systems, for example, organic, intensive, free range, and they all mean different things. So, you can argue within them and justify reasons to eat meat or not eat meat based on the systems. There's also health implications, but you can have healthy meat eaters, you can have healthy vegans. So these things are quite subjective. But one thing what really hit me, and this made me switch from, I went to vegetarian and then switched to a fully plant-based diet, was the environmental impact. So I think all the other things you can discuss and debate: is it good welfare? Can they feel pain? At what level can they feel pain? Is it healthy for you? And so on. And, ultimately animals are dying, but there's different levels within that, the ability for certain animals to feel pain. So for example, I used to eat a lot of fish, and the science is only just catching up with that at the moment. But when I watched a documentary called Race and Extinction, actually, and it just went into the environmental impacts of agriculture, and especially animal agriculture. And that was a big wake-up call for me, because that was something that I couldn't justify. I couldn't look at different systems and think this one good for the environment. I mean, some are better for the environment, some nature friendly or more nature friendly, but ultimately the environment's really suffered for meat production, predominantly meat production. Obviously, any farming has an impact on the environment, but as I did my research, I realised how unproductive meat production is. So about 80% of all farmland is used for animal agriculture or producing feed for animals. And yet it's only producing a very low, some estimates are around 12% of global calories. So to me that's very wasteful. When we look at some plant alternatives, like rice can have a negative impact on the environment, but rice provides 25% of global calories. So to me, just making this shift was one way I could personally reduce my environmental impact. And I called myself a cheegan at first, because I used to love cheese, and I found it difficult to love alternatives and wean myself off it. But then I actually thought, what do I love more in life? And actually the wild animals which were being lost in places such as the Amazon, and then in the UK itself, where we used to be a temperate rainforest, and now we have about 13% tree cover. So although we have beautiful green land, it's generally void of nature. So I thought, from a personal point of view, I can lower my carbon footprint and also my environmental impact just by switching to this plant-based diet.
Yeah, and it does actually have a really profound effect, doesn't it? I mean, it is Veganuary this month, and there's loads of people around the country, around the world, just trying plant-based for a month, and it's really exciting actually, because it is such an important thing, because it's something that we do every single day. I mean, every day that we eat a meal, we make a choice. And every time that we go to the supermarket and we pay for a certain product, whether that be eggs, whether that be bacon, whether that be a soy burger, whether that be carrot sticks, like each one of those products has a carbon footprint, a air mile footprint, and also probably like pollution, like certain amounts of kind of negative effects on the environment, right? So kind of what other kind of facts have you got that kind of solidify this idea?
Well, I just think we're very wasteful within the food chain. So we throw, the average family in the UK throws £60 worth of 60 quid's worth of food away each month. So, whether that's plant-based or meat, we're wasting lots of calories which have had a negative impact on the environment to produce that food. But within the food chain itself, there's like massive waste. So if we think about fish farming, and it is improving, and they're looking at plant-based feed alternatives, but usually it takes 3 to 5 kilos of perfectly edible fish to produce 1 kilo of farmed salmon, for example.
Yeah. And actually, farmed fish are fed wild caught fish that are too small for human consumption.
Yeah.
So, and actually there has been, I've recently read a study where they replaced fish meal and fish oil with soy oil, various other plant oils, and plant-based meals. And they were actually producing far much more farmed fish by weight from the plant-based feed than the fish caught feed, which kind of tells you something in itself.
And also there's stuff like, in the UK we're quite fortunate that a lot of cattle are grass-fed, and a lot of traditional breeds can get up to slaughter weight through grass, but we still often supplement them, especially over winter. And it takes around 10 tonnes of grain, predominantly soy or corn, to produce 1 tonne of beef. So again, we've lost 9 tonnes within the food chain there. So I think just the way we look at farming and fishing, for example. So, we catch over 80 million tonnes of fish a year, and that's the legal catch, and it's thought the black market of fish is actually more than that. So to me, it's just like, how sustainable is that when we look at the bycatch problem, marine litter, and the species, which are species in their own right, wild species we're removing from the environment.
Can I just pause you before you get onto some more amazing facts? I just wanted to add just a little nugget of information that I know personally, and I don't know from an actual scientific point of view, if I understand that not everyone wants to go 100% vegan, 100% plant-based. I think the best thing that all of us can do is just take it down as much as we can, make steps each day to reduce our consumption. But I personally, from a marine biologist point of view, think that eating wild fish is possibly the worst thing we can do to the environment. And that's because it's indiscriminate. Fishing doesn't target individual species. Whatever ends up in that net is drowned and hauled on to the boat. And there's species all around the world that are getting caught up in these nets and drowning, and we're losing them as species because of this, because we want fish and chips on the beach in the summer, right? And fish fingers or whatever.
I think with fishing, it's a bit like farming. There's different methods, there's different techniques. So some can be classed more sustainable than others, and some you can target. But just a vast amount, 80 million tonnes legally a year, it's just, to me, it's just not sustainable. Where, the UN's advice is eat less meat. So if you eat meat 7 days a week, cut down to 5 days. If you eat 5 days, cut down to 3 days. If you eat it 3 days a week, do you actually really need it? I mentioned before about like cheese when I was switching to plant-based, but now I just think we're quite lucky in the UK that there's so much access to alternatives than plant-based food, which have such a lower carbon footprint. Because animal welfare is a massive issue. Environmental impacts is a bigger issue in terms of deforestation and habitat loss. But one of the things we all need to tackle is our carbon footprint. We can see what's happening in Australia, we've seen the fires in the Amazon, we see sea level rising and so on. So just doing something in our own, simply by cutting down some meat consumption and dairy consumption, can really make a difference. But just some of the other things I was talking about how it's not sustainable. Each year in the UK we kill 95,000 male dairy cows. Now that's predominantly wasted food, or goes into cheaper products. Back in the day, these cows will be reared for milk and then eaten as beef. But now we want chicken every day, we want beef every day, we want milk 5, 6, 7 times a day, how many times we have a cup of tea. Also each week in the UK, so every 7 days, we slaughter about 20 million chickens.
20 million individual chickens.
So that's like one
slaughtered.
one whole chicken per 3 people.
That's crazy.
Where pre-war, meat was a luxury.
Yeah.
Where now you see a lot of farms with poor welfare, but it's generally consumer driven because we want something cheap. I remember a few years ago a supermarket was doing a pack of 8 sausages for 16p. So you think, well, how's the farmer going to benefit from that, and what corners are going to have to be cut in terms of animal welfare, but also environmental destruction.
But before I lose my train of thought, I didn't quite finish what I was saying just a minute ago, because I wanted to explain with this whole fishing thing and gill nets, trawlers, ghost nets. They're not discriminate. So if, for example, you love dolphins, but you eat fish, you may not be aware that tuna in your sandwich or that cod and chips that you have at the beach on a Saturday afternoon most likely ended up in the death of a dolphin, because they get caught in those nets too. I study harbour porpoises. 3 of them are caught in fishing nets every single day in the UK as bycatch. They get caught and they drown and they die. So I think that's something that we really need to connect with. Just because we can't see it, I mean, the ocean is suffering so much because we can't see it, right? I think it's just really important to do our research I do my best to share my knowledge in this area because it's what I study. It's just making that connection with, dolphins and fish, that they're all one in the same, really.
So I think most people, if you ask them on the street, when you look at countries such as Denmark in the Faroe Islands, Iceland, Norway and Japan, when you ask them about their whaling policies, a lot of people are mad and disagree with it and angry, and rightly so. But when we combine all them, we're talking about thousands of whales actively targeted, where in commercial fishing it's 300,000 a year are killed. So the numbers, it don't even comprehend. I'm not saying fishermen actually go out to target these, they're not. They're accidental bycatch, but when you've got 300,000 a year,
It's unsustainable.
It's a massive amount.
It's completely unsustainable, and something needs to be done about it. But we do appreciate that, fishing isn't going to be abolished, and that's not what we're saying. We're just saying that it needs to be more sustainable, and it's down to us as consumers. We need to stop being so greedy. We don't need to eat it every single day.
No. So I think as well, just pay more for your products. So if you pay more, you will waste less. So if you buy a bag of salad for 60p, I guarantee if the leaves go a bit off, you'll throw it away. Where if you're buying something organic or locally produced and you've paid a bit more, you'll probably think, I don't want to throw that away. And that's the same with, when we can get burgers for 50p, then there's really no value in the animal, there's no value in the people who have produced the food. So therefore it's something, we're just throwing 50p away. Where if you do still want to eat meat and fish, there's lots of things you can do, like support organic production, support day boats, support hand and line caught fish, but also look at the species. I personally don't do it because I know lots of the negative environmental impacts, but there is a choice within the foods we buy as well. So if you don't want to substitute or switch to a different diet, there are simple things you can do within meat production, for example, to reduce the environmental impact. Now there still is a big footprint, and I said that before, that's why I stopped doing it. I could argue all day with people saying we're evolved to eat meat, we're not evolved to eat meat, it's healthier, it's not healthier, the animals suffer, the animals don't suffer. But when you look at the environmental footprint, it's very difficult to deny the amount of fish we're taking, the amount of bycatch, the damage we're causing to the seafloor, the deforestation, the soil erosion,
ocean dead zones, pollution, field runoff, flooding because of lack of woodland that's been felled.
But I often come across this thing. A lot of people say, well, if you were starving, would you eat meat? And that's a good question to answer, because obviously people would. But one question I would ask people is, if you had all the food you required and all the nutrients you need in day-to-day life, would you still actually eat something which has a massive environmental impact? So it's worth asking yourself that question as well.
I just want to kind of, for people who would really like to give this cutting down meat and dairy and egg products a go, for the sake of our glorious planet, because it is really in a state at the moment, isn't it? I mean, everything's kind of going wrong. So there's some really useful resources that you can access. So one that's really good about kind of highlighting the impacts on the environment is Cowspiracy. That's actually free on Netflix. If you want to look at more of a health point of view, you can watch Game Changers. And Racing Extinction, that's a really, really good one. That's more tailored to the extinction of species and biodiversity.
Yeah, and again, that's not just agricultural, it looks at all the impacts we're having on the planet. But I think when you tackle any issue, I think going for the biggest contributor is the best thing to do. So if your bath's flooding and it's got a small hole in it or a massive hole in it, you're probably going to fix the massive hole first. And I think when it comes to the environment, this is something we can just do instantly based on, at the next meal we make, we can reduce our carbon footprint. The next time we go shopping, whether it's plastic pollution, whether it's food miles, whether it's the way farmers have been treated, you have that decision. Your purchasing power is massive. And I think that's one of the biggest things which is going to promote change. And again, it don't have to be in conservation to be a conservationist. It's just something you can do. Look at your favourite animals and see what impact you're actually having on them from your own home. Again, small changes. It's not a blanket ban, don't do this, you must do that. But just tiny things you can do every day can make a massive impact.
Okay, so it's another short one from us today. So thanks very much for listening. We hope you found that insightful. We've actually got a few events coming up in the future. So if you're interested and you're in the Torbay area, we've actually got Dr. Samantha Law coming to give a presentation about her lemur research. And we've also got a climate change based talk with Dr. Andrea Guyon. And that's coming up in when? April?
Yeah.
And we've also got Abby from Lupine Media. She was in our first podcast about rewilding. She's actually coming to do a talk about her upcoming documentary about wolves. So that's really exciting stuff. You can find all of our events on our Facebook page. We have a clothing exchange coming up this month on the 25th. So on Saturday the 25th in Torquay, we're going to be holding a clothing exchange where you can either bring your clothes and swap them, or everything is pay as much as you like with a minimum spend of £1 per item. And it's only £1 to get in. So you can vastly reduce your effect on the environment by stopping fast fashion and getting a brand new wardrobe for 2020. So it's definitely worth checking out our events page for that. Okay, well, thanks very much. We'll speak to you again soon, and Happy New Year.